Hey y'all, what's up? It's Mack Garrison with Dash Studio and excited to continue our Dash Bash speaker series this week with the talented MOTOMICHI. MOTOMICHI is a Japanese-born award-winning projection artist and animator based in New York. His work is known for the use of black, white, and red with minimalistic graphic elements. Inspired by cryptozoology and mythology, he creates monsters that can be both monstrous and endearing, confrontational and playful. He's has exhibited globally in numerous museums. He's screened films at all the film festivals you heard of. Motomichi, I feel like you have the longest list of awards I've ever seen here. It's amazing. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I have to admit, and I think I speak for every animator out there, at some point in time, we've always wanted to get into projection mapping ourselves. I feel like everyone has always kind of had that. So excited to have you speaking at the Bash this year and doing a workshop on it. How did you get into projection mapping originally?
How I got started was kind of funny. So I actually studied graphic design, and then I started doing animation. And then but then I didn't really study like animation. I got into animation by learning Flash.
Oh, nice. Yeah, okay. I
Yeah.
remember Flash.
So it
Yeah, of
was kind of
course.
heavy like in the web stuff. And then like the friends that went to school with, they kind of got into like motion graphics, and then I kind of feel like I missed the boat. And then I was like,
Mm,
and it kind of sucks. And I was like, I really want to get it. I tried really hard. So I started making a lot of animation. That's how I got into like a 2D animation.
nice. Just
But
kind of
then,
doing it on yourself, on
yeah,
your own,
well,
kind
I
of
mean,
exploring it.
yeah. Also, I was doing a lot about web animation, like Flash
Sure.
animation online.
Right.
And then, but I really wanted to go kind of beyond that. So that's when I actually started submitting my work to film festival. And then, but then I wanted more. And I just thought that, and I came across with this thing called VJing, like video
Mm,
mixing.
sure.
And the VJ thing was pretty, like active that time in New York. So I guess I got to know someone I can't remember. And then I started like showing up this kind of VJ, get like coming back. And I started doing VJing. And then always when you do VJing, so you do video mixing. Like
Sure.
typically people think it's VJing like for the club. And then but then since I did the I started showing my work in the film festival. Some film festival or something kind of picked up. They saw in my website or something. Say, hey, your animation is gonna be in our festival. By the way, I see that you do VJing. You wanna come and perform for a party?
Nice. That's great.
So I started doing the VJing, but then the VJing became more like instead of doing it in club, I started doing VJing on the stage.
Oh,
And then
interesting.
that kind of became kind of like more like a projection.
Mm,
And then that's the time that later I found that a lot of VJs in I think specifically like in like Europe, like
mhm.
Central Europe, like Western Europe, these lot of VJs are started kind of experimenting how you can actually do the projection onto non-flat surface. That's how we started.
Oh,
And then that's
interesting.
where this kind of projection mapping software come in. And then believe it or not, it's still the projection mapping has strong root to the VJ culture.
Hmm.
So the lot of projection mapping software, including the one that I use, is developed by who used to be VJ.
Oh, how
So it's kind
about
of like,
that?
yeah, it's kind of like a natural transition. It's like, yeah, and I was actually invited to a festival called Mapping Festival. And as a VJ, and somehow just it didn't ring the bell. I just somehow like I never really connected the mapping to projection mapping. And then I did a gig, I did a performance with my friend musician. So that after the performance, the producer came, hey, Moro, just I want to speak to you, and in the backstage. So now we're going to pay you your fee, but would you be interested in us paying you the fee as a part of it as our software called Map Mapper? And I was like, somehow I guess I was in good mood. Like, all right, yeah, I'll take it.
You're like,
But
why not? Let's try it out.
yeah, she gave me this copy. And that time it's like in CD or DVD. I completely
Sure.
forgot about it. And then like 3 or 4 years later, I ended up picking up some I got this that time I was living in South America,
Hmm.
and then I got approached by local government saying that if I can do some kind of public installation. And there's like, oh, there's such a thing as mapping. And I
Oh,
remember, oh,
yeah.
I have this free software. I
I
gotta
haven't even
use it.
tried it yet. Let me open it up and see
So
what
that
it's
I got
like.
like good point is I installed it. Is that I think I can do this. So that's actually how so the first projection mapping I did was actually large scale in outdoor.
Wow,
It
the
was
very
super
first time
stressful.
the every first time you did it, you were like, "Yeah, I could do this," and project it
Yeah,
on
and
a
it was kind of
building.
stressful because I never done it. And I told him I could, and then the whole contact in Spanish, so I had to like, you know, not my
Translation.
language. That's my third language, right? So it's like I signed in. It's like, oh my god, I hope it's, Then I want to just, I don't know, kill. I mean, like they want to hate me or something. But anyway, so but then I really got in. After that, I really got into it.
That's really interesting. I love, thinking back on it, and even just as you described that story, it was always kind of a natural progression. It's like, oh yeah, I can put some visuals behind the stage. Oh yeah, we can project some visuals in here. Oh yeah, maybe I can do something even bigger. What's interesting to me, well, actually, let me ask you this. With that software you were talking about, Mad Mapper, is it
Uh-huh.
still the same thing? Is that still what you use today?
Oh yeah,
Wow. So that's something. So your whole career started by someone basically giving you this free software instead of a
yeah, I
payment,
know.
and you were like, sure, I'll give it a try. And now that's like your career.
Yeah,
That's
yeah, yeah.
wild.
No, I gotta thank her.
Yeah, you should reach back out. What
Yeah, yeah.
was the project? Do you remember what that first one was in South America where you were
Oh
projecting?
yeah, so that was that was the projection mapping in the central part of Quito,
Okay,
and
cool.
then that was I think 2012, I think.
Wow. Okay, nice. And I
But
imagine, like, any good project, you do it one time, you get interested, you're excited. And I'm sure someone saw it and said, hey, could you do this next thing for us? And it kind of starts to snowball a
yeah,
little
yeah,
bit.
yeah. So from there I started picking up like a lot of projects in Ecuador. That time I was living there.
Nice. And was this becoming your full-time gig at this point where you started
No,
to get
right
enough
now,
work and you're
I
like,
mean the thing
okay,
is that
maybe.
I always been doing like various different stuff. These days I do more, but um, I would say, yeah, projection mapping or projection mapping related is definitely the main thing now.
Nice. That's so cool. And I know you're teaching, and before our call, you were telling me that you were teaching a class over at NYU.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about how you got into teaching. Were you always teaching while you were doing this, or was there a
You know,
path that kind of brought you into it?
I mean, the first, before that, I always liked, um, teaching, but I'm more like a workshop.
Oh,
So
sure.
I started doing the workshop for character design. Since my work is based a lot with the character, and then so I got really like kind of into this sort of like finding out how I create work and how other people can create. And then, so I did a workshop, but then from there, since I started doing the projection mapping, oh, maybe I can do the workshop. So I started doing the workshop. Um, and then so I was living in Ecuador that time, and I moved back to New York in what is it? I guess 2016, I think.
Okay, sure.
And then since I was coming back here, and then I wanted to have some kind of something, like solid, right?
Yeah,
So
right.
I read, so I started, so luckily I got the teaching job in Parsons School of
Oh,
Design.
great. Nice.
And then from there, I actually I was asked to teach animation class. And
Fun.
then I actually wrote the proposal, say I can teach projection mapping, and I actually wrote the proposal to illustration department because I
Huh.
wanted illustrators and animators to do it, and they didn't pick up. But the design technology department picked up.
Interesting.
From there I started teaching there, and then now I don't teach at the Parsons anymore, but I teach at SBA and
Oh,
then
great.
NYU. But I think it's definitely teaching is a something that the kind of, like it sounds so cliche, but by teaching it, you kind of teaching yourself.
Oh, yeah, of
It's
course.
like
Well, I'm
it's kind
sure
of
it's kind of reminding you how to do
yeah,
some of these various things that
it's
you're
kind
like,
of really like forces you. Like for example, like we all use Photoshop, Illustrator,
yes,
right?
right.
We think we know, but then once you do slightly different than you normally do, you have no idea.
Oh, yeah, right,
Right?
exactly. You're like, I have
So
no
it's
idea
like,
how to make this. I forgot.
and the first time I thought, I was like, yeah, it's so easy to teach. I can teach like After Effects and stuff like that. But I was like, oh my, I just have no idea what they asked me.
Yeah, you're like, I don't even know how to make that. So you're like teaching yourself, which is
Yeah, so
good.
I have
It
to
probably
study, and which is great.
it keeps your skills sharp, right? It's
Yeah,
almost like sharpening
exactly.
a knife. You don't become rusty that way. And
Yeah,
I'm
exactly.
sure, oh, here's a good question for you, Motomichi. Do you find that what you're teaching to your students also influences your own creative work that you're doing outside of it? Like you discover something new and you're like, oh, I got to bring this into this next project I'm doing.
Yeah, I think it's definitely the one of the things that I think is that I really am conscious about is that by teaching, basically like you force yourself to learn something new, right? And
Right.
inside of me, I'm thinking, oh my God, this is just so useless. I'm never going to use it. But guess what? Once you learn, it's like a vocabulary. You can express, like you have another vocabulary to express something. So it's just, it's not like immediate, but at the same time, the fact that you already know, it's just basically you already know how to do it. So that becomes part of your kind of like data that you access when you do creative work. So I think for that way, yeah, it's definitely very, like, it does influence my work a
I
lot.
love that. You're kind of building up a toolkit. I think all of us as creatives are always trying to have a bigger toolkit
Yeah.
of ways of making things. So I could see that. Well, tell me a little bit just to pivot the conversation. I've got your Instagram pulled up right now, and I'm looking at some of these really cool creatures that you develop. I mean, you definitely have a style, Motomichi. I see this, red, black, and kind of white little monster that kind of keeps coming up throughout all your work in different places and utilizing different spaces. Maybe you could speak to me a little bit on the development of this particular character. Where does he or she or them or they come from?
So I like to use like monsters like as my like part of my work, like core part of my work. The reason is that the as an artist we all have certain themes that we always kind of deal with or explore or like express. And then in my case, that I like to like explore like the feeling of fear, or like something like the. I mean, yeah, fear is to me like more like universal language, and then the fear is obviously one of them, like love and fear and all that. And then the way I see monster is sort of like a visualized version of our fear. And then so I started reading about like mythical creatures and monsters. And then first time I read somewhere that I think some book I read or I can't remember, it said something like, oh, since the without the access to any technology or science, the ancestors didn't have any means to understand or cope with the pains they have to deal with. And then so by describing it like what it is as a form of monster creature, that makes it easier for them to deal with the the loss of their families or the entire town get wiped out or something. So it's easier for them to say, oh, it's just let's say thunderbird, all right?
Sure.
Just comes certain time of the year, and because of that we lose all the crops, say let's say. So I really like that sort of like aspect of it. So it's sort of like visual language, and then just basically describing like what fear is, but in the form of monster.
It's so interesting to me. I love that take on it, right? How it's universal. Everyone navigates fear. Everyone can relate to fear. But to ask you another question with it, you could easily say love, love, everyone knows love. Everyone can relate to love. You could have chosen love, but why choosing fear? Is it because there's like a stigma around it? What gravitated towards that, you think?
I mean, I think it's, yeah, I know.
But you're like, oh
I
man,
mean, I
that
think
is
it's
kind of
maybe
dark.
just because, because there's something wrong with me.
No.
But I
You're
think
just a creative. That's who we all are, right?
yeah.
We're all a
But I
little
think
off.
it's as an artist, I think it's the we all kind of skeptical one way or other, and then we always look for truth in certain way. And then in my case, I want to look for something that which is very like pure and very sincere. And then I think it is, and also the fact that also that it shows our weakness too. Let's say I mean, I can go on and on about it, but like fear is something that we can easily be manipulated with, and we all know that how media plays and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I think it's just something about it to me that those stuff that it's easy to talk about love or comfort or pleasure, but then pain or fear is something that we don't want to talk about. So I kind of feel like this is something that we can kind of explore more. And then, by admitting or by facing it, I think we can be kind of sincere, nice to each other.
I really like that.
Yeah,
No,
I
it's
really
good.
feel that, yeah, just because sometimes we will do a lot of stuff that it's just because we don't want to face something. I think it's just facing is very, very important.
No, I totally agree. And a follow up to that, I'm curious is, you've shown your work all over the world. You've had installations in numerous countries. Have you noticed certain countries or cultures reacting to your artwork in like different ways? Like when you talk about fear, are there any distinct countries that come to mind, or how people react to your imagery or visuals that are different from other countries? Have you noticed that?
I think it's the funny thing was that I always been based in New York. I grew up in Japan, but so the way I started my career as an artist was actually the not actually from New York. My work was mainly picked up in Europe, but specifically like places like Netherlands
Sure.
or the Norway or the Sweden or Eastern Europe.
Hmm.
And then they tend to see this kind of images, not necessarily dark or negative, but they tend to see in a way that they kind of more, you can say they're more open.
Sure.
Or maybe
Sure.
they just have different take on it. But then they don't really take it as a negative thing. They take it as kind of like some part of something. So I think that was kind of interesting. And then from there, I started showing my work in like in the US.
Sure.
But in the
Nice.
beginning, it was always been sort of like northern part of Europe, put it that way, or like eastern part of Europe.
Yeah, interesting. Well, and I think you're right. I think there is a stigma around fear, and just what you said a second ago highlights just, sort of there's uncomfortability in trying to speak towards it. And so how do you visualize it? How do you articulate that? I love that your visuals are given a medium for people to consider and to speak towards fear through, I think is really interesting. I'm always curious, Motomichi, we've talked on the series to so many different artists and creatives who are so talented in their own right. I'm always curious, who are some of the artists, the creators we're speaking with look up to? Who are some of the creatives out there whose work you really love? Who do you find inspiration from?
It's difficult. Okay, I mean, it changes, right? Like
Sure.
it depends on the time. But I think the first person that comes to my mind is actually Michel Gondry. Yeah, it's also part of it is that part of the reason that is that because I love music video.
Oh,
And
sure. Yeah.
that's something I wanted to do more, and I still do. But just it's kind of industry changed, and it's kind of difficult to find the gear. But I think to me, like his stuff is so good that when I look at it, I get jealous. That's how good he is.
That's a good
After
sign that you're doing a
after all
great
these
job
years,
if you
when I
get
see
jealous.
something that kind of gives me pain to watch his stuff, because it's kind of like, why didn't I do this? Or like, how could he do this? But that's how much I really adore his work.
Oh, that's great. I love that. I love that. I know
Yeah.
you're always looking for inspiration in different ways too. I know you have a tattoo project that I think I saw that Ashley was telling me, our producer, about. Have you done any, or do you have any of your work tattooed on yourself at all? Have you ever gone that far?
Myself, it sounds terrible, but I don't have any tattoo. Like,
No
even though
tattoos.
people do. But I mean, I have a very good explanation for this one. It's just because I was born and raised in Japan, and then in Japan, that having tattoo is a whole different issue. It's just basically that the having tattoo is it's not considered to be fashion at all. It's almost like, I mean, then we call it fashion tattoo these days. But if you have a tattoo, put it this way: if you have a tattoo, most likely you cannot go to public bath. Sometimes you are even prohibited to enter a beach.
Wow. Okay, I didn't realize that.
It's because of this Japanese mafia culture called Yakuza, and they tattoo themselves, and then so that we have this sort of like the almost like a regulation.
Sure.
And then and that's something that part of the reason is that when I go back to Japan, I want to go to the public bath.
Yeah, of course, right? You want to do all the things you love to do.
Yeah, and also that's something that I think my parents kind of will have hard time. So that's also out of respect too. So I just decided not to put any tattoo myself.
You can explore it. You can enjoy the creative and the medium, just not going on yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's great. Well, what are some of the hobbies that you do when you're not doing projection mapping or you're not teaching? What do you like to do on your free time?
I guess like the hobbies is, and I don't have that clear boundary between hobby and work.
That's a good sign, right?
It's kind of bad. But I actually, well, I was always living in New York City, but I moved to Westchester, which is suburb of New York. One of the reasons is that I actually like nature,
Mm.
So, well, since we moved to here, like when it's in summer, I like to do kayaking.
Oh, great.
And then I personally I just like water, just in general.
Mm.
So I like to be closer to water. So we live very close to the Hudson River. So I go for a walk there quite often.
I think there's
So
something about water that's kind of is so relaxing, or nature for me as well
yeah,
too.
yeah,
We're in
yeah,
such a digital world that when you can break away from it and be in nature and at peace, I love to be in the mountains and hiking as well too. It kind of is a reset for me.
exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's interesting as you were saying that, it made me think of isn't there a Japanese concept called ikigagi where there's like
Yeah,
overlap of what you love, what you're
yeah,
good
yeah,
at, what you need. I feel like you're checking all those boxes right now.
yeah. I'm sure. But I think, but that's yeah, yeah. That post has been shared a lot in the social media. So I see that. It's
Yes.
like it's funny because when I was growing up, like that's one of those things that the old people say. So we're like, oh, I
Mm.
don't want to hear it.
Oh,
But
sure.
as me being more grown up and see that, oh, actually that's kind of a nice
Kind of
concept.
nice. It's good. I mean, I think I'm curious what you would say to this. I find that when you're in life and you're in different stages of your life, there's always advice that you would give to yourself at different ages, having gone through all this creative yourself, explored so much. What would you tell someone who's maybe just getting going on their creative journey? If someone maybe just graduated high school or just
Mm.
got out of college and they're thinking about pursuing a creative career, what's some advice that you would give? What's some advice you give to your students?
This is also like advice to myself, and also
Mm.
I'll give that advice to myself like 5 years ago, 10 years ago, or maybe last year too. But what I will always say is just to just make something, just keep making something. The I think it's kind of like over the years I learned that the being artist is kind of like walking up the stairs, and you cannot just like jump and it's just basically the more you create, the farther you go. And then I think it's sometimes that without just making it so complicated, like I kind of feel like when I was younger, I was too impatient and I was just too focused on sometimes just something too close to me and something too far from me. But I wish that I had known the more about like I don't know what I wish I created focused on creating more than just worrying about like how to get my stuff out there or how
Mm.
to improve. Sometimes just you have to just keep making it, and
I
then
love that.
I think
It kind of feels like, this day and age with so much social media, there's
uh,
almost pressure as creatives to make stuff to be seen as opposed to just
yeah,
making stuff because you enjoy it. And I think that's like really important. Just keep making stuff, right? Just keep it moving, keep
yeah,
trying and
yeah,
exploring. I really do love that a lot.
yeah,
Well,
yeah.
I'm hoping that folks come and explore and take your workshop this summer. We're going to have a great time here in Raleigh. Maybe
Uh,
you could give folks a little bit of a teaser. What are we going to get into for projection mapping at this workshop? What are we going to try to do in this workshop, you think?
so first of all, I just want to kind of introduce what is projection mapping, and then more like I want to focus on what you can do with it. So the meaning that let's say you're already a creator, you already have something that you want to show, and then I want to present like projection mapping as sort of like one of these kind of options you have to how to show your work. And then so that I'll go through kind of basic of it, but it's actually projection mapping is super easy. So so they can definitely just like learn how to do that very quickly. But I think most like I want to kind of encourage people to actually try it after workshop.
It goes back to that advice you just said. You just got to keep making and keep
Yeah,
trying.
yeah,
Don't let the friction of something new stop you from creating. Well,
yeah.
I love it. Well, I've been sitting here chatting with MOTOMICHI. He's a Japanese-born award-winning projection artist and animator based in New York. And he's going to be teaching a workshop this summer, June 11th through 13th, here in Raleigh at the Dash Bash on projection mapping. So if you've ever been interested in learning about how to do it, how to get into it, this is the time and the place to do it. So grab your tickets. And MOTOMICHI, can't wait to hang with you this summer. And thanks so much for chatting with me today.
Thank you so much for having me.